I asked over 1,800 producers to vote for the best snare sound ever on a record. The results are in, so let's count them down. Coming in at number 10 is Two Princes by Spin Doctors. To be honest, I had no idea what this song was when I saw it on the list here, but once you hear it, you know. Yeah, let's listen to that fill again. I mean, the snare definitely sounds awesome. Tons of detail. You can really hear that bottom snare mic. And the room sound is like, I don't know if they doubled that up with a room sample or something, but it's just like, it just pops and explodes. Okay, number 9 was the album Dark Horse by Nickelback. Let's check it out. So yeah, the mix on this album is great. It's an awesome example of a big rock mix. The snare, the drums in general are not necessarily super real sounding, but they sound really big. Go and listen to any song on this record. Very different from the last snare we just heard. It's a much deeper, fatter sound with a nice kind of splatty reverb sound. I really like the drums on this record. Number 7, this one surprised me a little bit, not because of the snare sound at all, but just because it's so new, and it's Wildfire by Periphery. Yeah, listen to that tasty fill. Awesome room tone, and it's not hyped, and believe it or not, I was told by Adam Getgood, who mixed this record, that there's no sample on the snare. So that's pretty impressive. And I think it deserves to be here because not only does it sound great, but I also think it represents a trend where in heavy music and metal, for the last 10 or 15 years, we've had really overdone, ridiculous, crazy sounding drums, especially snares that just sound like bombs going off instead of a real drum set. And the trend is kind of shifting away from that. And I think what you hear on this record really represents what more and more artists and what more and more listeners want to hear. So fantastic job on this one. Number 7 is classic pop punk record, Blink-182, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. Let's check it out.
Shit, have some fun.
It's just a classic snare sound. It's deep and punchy, but it also has a really nice ring in the high frequencies. Let's check out a different song. And to me, this sounds like a big, deep Black Beauty or maybe a bell brass or something like that. Let's skip ahead a bit. Yeah, that's awesome. I wouldn't have thought of that as I was thinking myself of what are my favorite snare sounds, but as soon as I heard it again, it's like, yeah, that definitely belongs to be here. Number 6 is Back in Black by AC/DC. That's interesting. It's, I definitely don't mean to knock this. I didn't really grow up listening to old rock music. I kind of just started on the modern stuff. But to me, it's not necessarily an amazing snare sound, but just because it's that guitar and drum intro with such a simple beat, it just has that iconic quality to it, right? And what stands out to me on this one is definitely the reverb. You can hear there's a pre-delay and almost like a slap that happens with the reverb. And actually, we can try to recreate that here. I just did this in Superior Drummer. So check this out. Within Superior Drummer, we have a reverb here. I'm just going to mute it at first. Okay, now let's hear it with the reverb. So it's a little bit exaggerated here. But the trick with this is the pre-delay. Listen. and you can hear that tiny little gap after the snare is hit, and then the reverb splats out. That's what you're hearing on that AC/DC track. It's pretty interesting. I can see why this is an iconic snare sound. All right, getting into the top 5. Number 5 is Led Zeppelin, When the Levee Breaks. Pretty interested to hear this one because, again, I didn't really grow up listening to old rock music. Okay, that's actually a sick drum sound. Let me hear that again. It's kind of weird that it's panned a bit to the left, but you get used to it after a few seconds. What's really interesting about this one, it's the first one we've heard here that has a delay on the snare. Actually, it's on the whole kit. So let me try and remake that here. So check out this drum loop. That's the drum part, right? So if we just create a send to a delay return, so the first thing we want to do is put an 8th note delay with some feedback. But the thing with this track is that the delay is filtered. So if you listen to it again, it's kind of filtered into the high frequencies. So let's put the Telefy plugin just to filter it. So that's a lot closer, and the last thing that it needs is some reverb, so the delay is actually going into some reverb. So it sounds like this. It's a really cool effect, especially when you filter the return and even put the return into some reverb. So try that out in one of your mixes. Number 4, Digital Bath by Deftones. Man, that is killer. I haven't heard this record in a long time. Sounds like a much shallower snare than a lot of the ones we've heard so far. Great reverb and room tone on it. Sounds very natural, and there's a nice contrast between those little ghost notes and then the really hard rim shots. All right, getting into the top 3. Number 3 is the Black Album by Metallica.
Trust in who you are, and nothing else matters. Never open my.
So this is a lot brighter on the attack. It's a little drier. Let's check out another song. So way more of a room sound explosion there off the snare in this track.
Sleep with one eye open.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's very aggressive. It's very bright. It's very mid-rangey. But I think this definitely set a trend and set a tone for metal records for a long time. Number 2 is Nirvana, Nevermind. And I knew this one had to be on the list. I mean, what a classic rock snare sound. Like, to me, this it couldn't get any more classic than this. It sounds like a Black Beauty to me. That's what I thought when I first heard it again. And I did a little searching. There seems to be some debate about whether it was a brass Black Beauty or whether it was a Tama Bell brass snare. I could see how it could be either one. It's fairly dry, not a ton of reverb or room tone in the mix, but man, this is a snare sound that would work in like any rock or heavy record, I think. And if you want something like this, just grab a Black Beauty. All right, and the snare that was voted as the number 1 best recorded snare sound of all time, Riot by Paramore. I mean, I'm not really surprised that this grabbed the top spot. It's such an iconic snare sound because it almost started a chain reaction. of rock drums and heavy rock drum sounds after David Bendeth mixed this one. It was like everyone was obsessed with that snare and everyone wanted the Paramore snare sound. It's also so great how massive it sounds on that first hit. Very deep, very loud, very aggressive. Now, like I said, it really started a trend. A lot of people rip this off. Like they even have the exact snare sample that was used here. It's not that hard to find. And I actually hear a lot of fairly big kind of heavy rock metal records that literally are using this exact sample, which I think is kind of lame. And it definitely got way overdone. Snares and drum sounds in general on heavy records just blew up way too big to the point that it sounded ridiculous and unlistenable. But I think this one, at the very start of the trend, it was still tasteful. It's not hard to listen to this record. And maybe it doesn't sound like a natural snare per se, but it is very exciting. It is massive. If you want something like this in your mixes, then you need a really big, deep snare. You hit it really hard. Lots of compression, probably a lot of parallel compression, some distortion, probably some clipping, lots of saturation. This is a heavily processed snare. All right, that's the top 10. If there was a snare that you think belongs in this list that wasn't picked, then definitely drop it in the comments below so we can check it out. And whatever snare sound you're going for, in the mix, there are certain frequencies that work to boost and cut for pretty much any snare sound. We definitely heard these frequencies in all of these mixes that we played here. So if you want to learn those magic frequencies for snares, check out this video here.